America. The word bishop is used by every denomination. We talk about synodical presidents and that. Over there, they don't talk that way. They ask us to train the people they sent to us so that they can be a good pastor. So we teach is what we do. Can you give us the next slide? So what does these two photos have in common? Well, the one on the left is a well-to-do Lutheran church. Most of the churches don't look like that way. They're little huts with metal tin roofs. Often the walls are made out of mud or sometimes dung, animal poop, and there's very little furniture. There might be a cross, maybe not, depending if they could afford it. So things look very simple. So this is probably some kind of a cathedral or something like that, but it's filled with people, and then you have an empty European cathedral. And what these have to do in common is, if you know anything about the history of the Lutheran Church, the founding father of the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod, his name was C.F.W. Walther. And in the 1800s, the Lutherans were persecuted in Europe under the Prussian king, who was watering down the teachings of Jesus. So false teaching was being crept in there. And the confessional Lutherans, the ones that believed the Bible to be true and that were saved by grace alone through faith and so forth, they got in a bunch of boats and they came over to America, and they planted the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod, who then planted the Lutheran Church Canada that we have over here. Now the church over in Europe, well, there isn't really a church left in Europe, as you know. It's all very, very liberal. It's all very universalist. If you do tourism there, and you go on a Sunday morning, well, you'll see more people at a concert on a Saturday night than you would on a Sunday morning, because that's what happens with false teaching, is it gets watered down and eventually there's nothing left. That's how the devil gets his fingers in there. But that church, that Lutheran church in Europe, was the one that planted all the Lutheran churches in Africa. So there's lots of Lutheran synods in Africa, but they're Lutherans in name only. Most of the pastors have never read the catechism. They don't know it exists. They don't know who Martin Luther is. They don't know what the Reformation was. They're begging for teaching so that they can actually be Lutherans. If you know your catechism, even a portion of it, you likely know more than an average Lutheran pastor in Africa somewhere. The kind of worship that you would be experiencing in Africa at a typical Lutheran church would be looking like a Pentecostal sort of worship. You would have a communion that was consisting of maybe soda pop and cookies that you could get at the local market. No comprehension of what it's all about. At the very least, you get, maybe if it's not soda pop, you get grape juice or something like that. Okay, so, but the point is that people really don't know very, very, very much. Why false teaching matters so much is that if you think about it like this, false teaching is lies about God. And when we lie about God, we don't hurt God. He's a big boy. He can handle it. We hurt ourselves. We don't consistently hear about his love for us in Jesus. We don't consistently hear that we have our sins freely forgiven. In Africa, one of the large false teachings is called the prosperity gospel. And you find it out here too in places. But the idea is that if you're healthy and wealthy, then you're blessed by God, and if you're suffering or you're poor, well, you're cursed by God, right? Well, in Africa, you can imagine most people aren't really well-to-do. So the pastors, the evangelists or whatever on the streets and so forth have the fancy watches that are probably rented from somewhere, or they're fake gold or something. They've got these beautiful suits they wear, and they drive a nice car as well. God knows where they get them from, and what they're basically saying is, you come to my church, and you can look like me. You can be blessed by me. You come to my church, and you'll get God. You give me money, and God will give you more money. And so people are so desperate that they buy into the lie, and not only do they suffer physically, but they wonder, where is this God that has been promised to me? Or in the case of Mombasa, they fasted themselves to death to the point of, well, you know the results of that. So you know as Lutherans, that's not true. That the Lord's glory is a hidden phenomenon. We find it in Jesus, the crucified one. He is God. He is love, and yet he doesn't look like God. I mean, he doesn't look all that loving, does it? It looks terrible, and yet there is where we find the presence of our Lord, which is great comfort to us in the midst of our suffering and our bad experiences in life or our poverty, because we never have to wonder if whether his promises are there or not. They're always found in the Jesus that we know to be our loving Savior, and the one we receive in the true sacraments Sunday after Sunday as he feeds us and he shepherds us and he looks after us. And that seems like such an easy idea for us Lutherans here, because you've heard about it, you've been fed so richly for all these years. Well, in these other countries, this is often new. They don't know about this God that loves them to that degree, and so they're often gulled or duped into these false teachings. And in fairness to these pastors, a lot of them don't know better either. They don't have money to go to a Bible college. They think, well, I've opened my Bible. I think I know what something said. I like it, so I want to be a pastor now. And then the next thing they know, they have a big church with people coming in there, believing these sorts of things. So what we do is we teach the truth. We teach the good old-fashioned Lutheran gospel that you all know to be true from our school, and it produces wonderful fruits. We're one of the few groups that are doing that in Africa. And if you don't believe me, then ask yourself this question. When was the last time you had a missionary come and do something like this on a Saturday morning or midweek or something, right? It's not frequent, right? I mean, when I was growing up, I grew up Lutheran. We used to have this, every month at least, we'd have a Wednesday night activity or a Sunday afternoon where we'd have these missionaries come in and do a slideshow and show you what they're doing, right? And so forth. Well, we're not doing that anymore because, frankly, there aren't missionaries over there. There's a lot of people who are afraid of going for liability reasons. It's not comfortable. We don't live in a climate that likes that. White people going over to Africa, it looks imperialistic, right? That doesn't look like a good thing to do, right? So we have the problem with wokeism and so forth, saying, well, everyone's going to heaven anyway, universalism, so why would you want to tell people about Jesus to save them from hell if there's no hell? So instead, let's just take money and buy food instead of spending money in a school, right? And teaching people about the way to heaven. We still believe there's a hell. We believe there's a heaven. We believe God loves everybody. And we believe it matters to teach people about Jesus so that you get to heaven. And we believe that if we don't teach the right stuff about Jesus, they still might end up in hell. So our school is one of the few that is actually doing good old-fashioned missionary work, and we often suffer for it because we get criticized. Also, in the old days, even the liberal churches were doing mission work. United Church was actually going out doing mission work. Now all those liberal churches aren't doing anything over there. They're just sending money over, and which is being abused by the government. It's not going to the people, even when they're trying to do humanitarian efforts. It's just going into people's pockets. It's not helping the people anyway. So this is to explain why you don't hear about missionaries over in Africa from North America, because it really is quite quite unpopular. My point is, we're doing it the old way, and if people are criticizing us, well, we'll give explanations, and when you're telling the truth, well, what is there to criticize? So let's go to the next one. So here's a little bit about our school. Our founder, Rev.Dr.Maj, is American. He's got 6 kids. His wife was married to a Finnish lady. He was sent over in the days of Gerald Kieschnick, if you know that person. He was a synodical president of Missouri Synod many years ago, but he wasn't theologically as sound as the ones that came after him. And so he was sent over as a missionary, but the president of Synod at that point said, you go over there, you do humanitarian work, but don't do any teaching. You can give tracts out to people, but you can't teach them, because that's imperialistic, right? Well, what we're founding is the African leaders are saying, how can we teach unless we've been taught? So they're saying to us, can you please teach us about the gospel? Can you teach us about Lutheranism? So this is what Reverend May did. He ended up leaving as an LCMS missionary and worked for the Lutheran Heritage Foundation, which does Bible translation of Lutheran tracts and literature and so forth. He learned Swahili, so he's one of the main guys who translated, for instance, the Book of Concord into Swahili and other dialects. And while he was translating for the Lutheran Heritage Foundation, he also had a sort of Bible school on the side, because there was this great need for people saying, we want to learn the catechism, we want to learn what Lutheranism is all about, and so forth. So next slide there, Marcus. So after 8 years of doing this, the bishops were saying, please train our people. Well, it resulted in the first ordination. This is the first ordination of our students back then. And you can see on the right-hand side that the kind of worship we do there is the kind of worship you're familiar with as well. Africa is a very conservative country. We love it there because that's they still have the values that we grew up with in Canada, not the ones that are being pushed on us nowadays, as you all know, right? So it's great to be around Africans who believe abortion is wrong, LBGT, WXYZ, split P this, split P that, or double spirits, or whatever that stuff is, that doesn't exist over in those countries. So we love that kind of culture, moral culture, if you want to say it, that supports us and for my kids to be raised in. And they also have a deep respect and reverence for worship, unlike a lot of American churches. However, a lot of that Americanism, that Pentecostalism has influenced Africa all over the place, to the point where Africans think that, you know, the rock bands and the speaking in tongues and doing all these dances and all this is somehow African. And I always explain to the Africans it's not actually African. If you read the New Testament and you read about Acts, right from the very beginning, missionary work, even from the first Ethiopian who was converted on the road and was baptized there, the gospel spread into Africa. The Christian church's roots the earliest roots are in Israel, and then Africa and Europe a little bit. And so I'll say that worship like this that we do here is the historic African worship. And so as they learn about that, they get excited about that. And they realize that a lot of the stuff they think is Lutheran isn't actually Lutheran, it's from these other denominations. So what's very refreshing for our students and the larger church is they have a place where they can learn how to have a proper worship that's reverent, that's historic, that's biblical, that's familiar, the kind that we have been blessed to receive, whereas over there, it's all new to them. Next slide. So what Rev.Dr.Maj did was he bought a piece of land, 15 acres of land in the middle of the desert, where there's the tribal people that live there, the Maasai types, like this guy here. They've always got a stick with them. They dress in whatever traditional clothing. Whereas where he started off was near Nairobi, in a suburb of Nairobi, and that was where all the European people are, the diplomats, the United Nations people, and the other missionary groups, including Missouri Synod. All the white people in a very comfortable life living there. What Rev.Dr.Maj did, as an adventurous spirit as he was, is one reason, but also because he sought to give the gospel to people, he said, what good is it for us to be all around our own kind of people? I need to get amongst the tribals so I can witness to them. And that's not going to be if neighbors look like us right next to each other. Plus the land and the rent was so expensive that it just made absolutely no sense. So he did the risk, and he went out and he bought in the middle of tribal community so that we could witness to these people and have our school there at the same time. Rev.Dr.Maj has gone to remote places of Africa. Has had malaria 13 times. He's had one that almost killed him. He tells about the story of him in a Jeep, where he wasn't sure if he was going to make it. It was a 50-50 chance that he'd make it or not, for all night long, shivering through his malaria. And why does he do it? Because he goes to regions where nobody else is willing to go. None of the other missionaries have the courage to go or willing to take the risks. And so the man is a real hero in a sense, going out and doing all those sorts of things. So he's the founder of our organization. Next slide. So out there in the middle of nowhere, he builds a compound in which we have a running school and mission center with guest housing for students, for volunteers, or for staff rather. We have dormitories for students. We have administration buildings and cafeteria. We don't have our chapel built yet. That's the last building. We're using a portion of our library for a chapel. It's again just approximately 8 years old, but Reverend May, before he became Christian and then Lutheran, was a former architect, and he built these fancy buildings in America and different places. He showed me pictures of them and so forth. Well, he took his skills in his architectural world, his engineering ideas, and he put it to play here in a self-sufficient, eco-friendly compound where everything is solar paneled. We have about 1 million liters of water that we capture whenever it rains. During droughts and so forth, there's adequate water with even a borehole that gets to down deep in the wells. We have a working farm where everything is recycled. All the manure and so forth is used to fertilize. And we're also a light to the neighboring communities. A lot of the tribals who don't actually know how to irrigate things properly to make maximum use of the little water that you have in the desert. Road building, he's done all these things for our own sake, but also as a help to the surrounding community. So we're quite a happy welcome. People are very happy that we're there, that the tribal people, because they benefit from all of our work. So as we're building, we have probably about 100 people on the compound at any point. Marcus, can you move? And then there's another picture of it. Shows it I think it must have been an earlier design at some point, but it gives you a little snapshot of some more information in the text there. So next slide, Marcus. So we've got chickens and cows. My boys work in the field every day for at least an hour. So Marcus, my little one, he milks the cow by hand, so we get unpasteurized milk, all we can drink. We don't have that much meat though, because we sell a lot of our food to make money, and so we get chicken about once a week. We get eggs, but we don't have that much protein. So when Pastor is talking about me losing weight, that's probably the reason. We eat a lot of cabbage and a cornmeal every single day, sauerkraut, and other versions of whatever you make cabbage with. And again, this sort of like a rice paste, you could kind of say. And we've got goats. That's the main food over there. But again, it's quite pricey to have that. But we have that probably once a month or something, a goat. So I'll tell you more about that there. But you can see kind of the field there in the back there, how much we grow and sell. Next slide there. So here again, more snapshots of some of our students out there working. The only thing that we haven't recycled yet is the sewage that we have, but we're looking for ways of doing that. And we have to pay to have our garbage removed, like any plastics. So again, we try to recycle everything. Even the rabbit urine is used as we have a way of capturing it for. What is rabbit urine used for?
I think it's a pest deterrent.
All right, right. And we grow our own vineyard grapes so that we can have a communion wine. And so basically everything's been thought about in terms of self-sufficiency. We're not fully sufficient and self-sufficient, but that's one of our long-term goals. Next slide. So this is some of our buildings. You can see the cafeteria in the bottom left, bottom right, that's the inside of it. Our dormitories are in the middle, the mission center is on the right. That's again where the missionary family, the other missionary family lives. Including guest housing in there, and there's a home that's being built for us, almost done right now. That's also will be probably rented out for retreats after we leave as a moneymaker. Right now, my family for a year we haven't lived together because we've lived in 3 different locations on the compound. So we're excited about the new home being built. It's all made out of fieldstone and the earth material. We have guests that want to come and see our site from all over the place because they're seeing it as a kind of a prototype for other work in Africa, because again he's used the material of the ground in good stewardship and as well finding ways of capturing water. Every drop that falls on the roofs, the eaves troughs capture it into these big cisterns. The cisterns are about the size of these 2 pews if you put them all together, we've got at least 2 of those size sisters underground to capture all the water, which we also help share with our neighbors in trouble. Next slide. So I don't know if you know about the Good News magazines from the States. They're a catechetical magazine. I think I saw some in the back there. We're the key distributor of those in Africa. So we have tens and thousands, and that's our administrative assistant in the bottom left, standing by those. And you can see more of our literature at the top left. So we share with all sorts of other Christian organizations our literature to get them out to Right, absolutely, yes. So we've got, it's a lot of like the Lutheran Hour ministry tracts, those kind of things, small catechisms, of course, in various dialects, and Bibles in different dialects are not that hard to come by. So again, there's all sorts of other organizations that distribute Bibles, but getting them translated into some of the less familiar dialects is something that we also focus on. So that's our, after church Sunday worship, we have worship in there, and the pastor's making an announcement, and there's our students in the bottom right. You can see them in class. Next slide, please. So this brings us to us. One reason that we're there is that one of my specialties at the seminary is accreditation. I worked for the military for 11 years, and a few of those years I worked at a school, a military school, doing the kind of work I'm doing there and that I was doing in St. Catherine's, which is basically making sure that we stay an official school that the government recognizes, and in Africa, making our school one that the government recognizes. Because there's so much false teaching and so much damage that pastors are doing in Africa, the governments of Africa are saying now, we're not going to let people wear the collar or own land or call themselves pastors unless they can show a degree from an official certified school, in our case a Lutheran school, anymore. And that's why we're actually feeling a need over in Africa, because there's not many Lutheran schools that have that certification. There's one in South Africa that has it, but the South African one basically caters to like white-skinned European or Africans who have money that can go there. Our school is for anyone. If you've got no money, we'll make a way. You work part-time with us or whatever, but we don't let money be the hindrance to bringing people into our school. So that's what makes us different from the South Africa school. We don't have any Europeans that go there. And then I think we're the only other one right now, because some of them have lost their certification. There's a French one that I think has just lost it, so we're looking at doing French education for the French Lutherans in Africa, where there's many, and now we don't even have a seminary for them. And then there was one in Ethiopia that has become liberal, that Missouri Synod has cut themselves off of, and they're Ethiopian, or in Ethiopia, that have started, I think, to ordain women or something like this, and other things like that. So we're likely one of the only couple of schools once we get accreditation. So I'm there to get accreditation, try to get that. Looks like we'll receive that, and that makes us again a real hot item. But there's not. So in any case, so that's my family. They're going to introduce themselves in a few right after I've done this presentation. If you go to the next one there. And that's me. Talks a little bit about what I do and some of my background. So we'll pass through that one there. And this is me teaching in the right hand, and my wife and I helping with the house a little bit. We try to work with the people on our site so that people, well, because we need as many hands on deck in terms of building and operating the school, but also to show the workers that we're not these North Americans who live this kind of way, and everyone else is working this kind of a way. So my family there, again, at least one hour a day, are in the fields working. They're digging a manure pit, right, of some kind there, the boys, and again, they all have their chore list, and so it's a real kind of communal spirit, you could say. Next slide there. So these are some of our students. We only have right now between 15 and 20 students because of the post-COVID fallout stuff. So when COVID hit, The group that we have right now, they all had to go home. A lot of them didn't come back because they had to look after their families and they had to make money so they could live, and then we're hoping they come back down the road. So basically COVID stirred everything up, and if you think everything was upside down over here, you can imagine it's tenfold upside down over there. So, but once these ones graduate, we already have a lineup of ones that want to come for the next group. We can accommodate between 30 and 50, and once we're accredited, our biggest challenge will be vetting and making sure we get the best ones that are the best potential students. We also have accommodation now for families, so that they can bring their families with us, and the wives can work, and also looking at maybe building a school on the site for the children of the students. Because they come from all over Africa, which means they're gone for 3-month time periods, which means the wife and kids are alone trying to make ends meet for that amount of time. Our students work half the day on the site and study half the day, but the money they make half the day is going to pay for the tuition that they are not able to pay. It's only paying a slice, a tiny slice, but it's symbolic. It's saying you need to own your own, you can't just have handouts. So you can't just say, well, someone else is going to pay for all my education. No, you're going to work 3 hours a day, and that's paying for part of your education, even though we all know North Americans are paying the vast majority for that education. So next slide. So the needs in Africa are immense, as you know. So how do we decide who to help and not help? We're there to train students, but we also live amongst poor people, tribal people who are asking for help every day. So basically we try to help our neighbors, hiring them to work at our site, just helping in other ways. I mean, basically just giving money where we can. But we try to help in terms of training people for more sustainability in their communities. So if we have one girl, she's not a very good cleaner, but she's the breadwinner for her whole family because her dad is crippled. So she for instance works at our site, cleaning the bathrooms and so forth, because we know if we don't keep her hired, then the family has no income at all, and you get about $5 a day there. That's the average wage, $5. But the food prices are no different than it is here, even in the market. It might be a little bit cheaper in the market, but I mean, it really is mouth to hand to mouth living. So we try to help in those ways. That's probably the biggest bone of contention we have in where we're situated, is there's so much jealousy because we can't hire everybody, we can't help everybody. So we strategically try to think of how we can help people. The other principle we operate is we help anyone who's connected to our school, for instance, the bishops and their church bodies, and our former students. So one of our former students who graduated had a very small church. It was probably about the size of this pew to the wall, and then over here, that kind of a square, again, made out of mud. He asked for years if we could build a church for them, so we finally said yes. So we took some of our students to learn half-day schooling at his site, and then half-day we were building his church with him and with other members of the community and congregation. And this was also an example to our students, saying to our students, you can't be in Africa, you can't be a pastor who sits in an office wanting other people to do the work, like the janitorial work or other things. You're basically looking after the whole thing as a pastor in Africa, which means you get your hands dirty. So you're going to be there lifting rocks and making cement and so forth, so that when you get your church, you're going to be doing that with your church. So the idea is you're probably the most educated person in the community, which means you're going to be the nurse and the doctor and the finance person and all those things wrapped up into one. Because it's not like here where you've got all kinds of other skill sets to draw from. So we're trying to show that to our students. So that's me lugging water from the community well. It's about 1 kilometer one way to get the water to the cement, where the church is being built, with the gravel to mix. So it's just back and forth all day long with some of our students. So next one there. So between semesters, Rev.Maj and I, who are the two missionaries there, we travel around the country, giving seminars on the same kind of stuff that we're teaching the students. So students that can't come to our school are asking if we can come to them. So we'll do these 1 week or 2 week crash courses on the catechism or Reformation history or Old Testament survey course, whatever it is. This is me in a refugee camp, the border of Kenya and South Sudan. About 700,000 people, refugees living permanently on that border. It's quite remote, difficult to get to, a little bit dangerous as well. So, but I don't mind that kind of thing. So I went out there to baptize about 40 Lutherans who'd been waiting 2 years to be baptized because they didn't have a pastor. There's two students from their community that are learning to become pastors, and when they get ordained, God willing, they will go back and serve in that refugee camp. They won't move. They will minister forever until they die in that refugee camp. But in the meantime, they're not allowed to do the sacraments. So that's me going in, doing the instruction, and baptizing them. Next slide. So we have, just like you would have here, what we call field work, or in our context. We do that over there as well. So we brought the students to do an evangelism visit here. I don't believe these are Christians, so he's answering Bibles, one of our students. He's from Burundi, this one. And then this one's from Rwanda. And this man hasn't had a pastoral visit in a couple of years. He's a crippled man that's just been sitting in this little dark dungeon, I kind of call it. And he was just filled with tears in his eyes to be able to have someone speak to him the gospel and give him a little Bible study. So our students are the ones going there, training, learning how to do pastoral visits. Why this pastor hasn't visited him, I don't know. But anyway, next slide. So this is us teaching. This is me teaching them preaching, one of my specialties in St. Catherine's. And what we're trying to do there is not just teach them how to preach, but how to lead. And what we find with the students is the more comfortable they are in a public speaking setting, the more they're also looking after themselves in other ways. So when I arrived there in September, the new students had come in. Many of them had hygiene problems. Many of them just sort of clumsy, disorganized. But as you train them as a leader, as a preacher, as a leader, all those sorts of things fall into place too. So that they start to, halfway through the semester, start showing up with clean shoes. Or you're noticing that they don't need to be reminded to wash their hands before eating. They're washing them themselves. That they're putting their best shirt on when they're coming to church. That they're behaving in a gentlemanly way that we'd expect any pastor to behave, you see? But a lot of them are coming from places where they're not highly educated, so they haven't had that privilege of having those learning skills put in place. So we get to get that all at one time, and it seems to be working quite well. So and so you see, what this man here is. And anyway, you can see just how we go about this. My daughter would teach them how to read the Bible publicly every day. The students, we have chapel, like you had this morning, Matins, and in the evening Compline, and the students lead it, and they read publicly the Bible, but this is me helping them read, and then they practice with my daughter twice a day how to articulate, how to enunciate, and so forth. Next slide. So one of the reasons the students are working in the field is not only to pay some of their wage or pay some of their tuition, but also learn life skills. The reality is there's not going to be one of our pastors who can have a church that has people putting enough money in the offering plate to sustain their income. So what we're trying to do is give them the skills that they need so that they can have a other job and then do this basically on the side. So one of our programs that we're accrediting them for, we're accrediting for 2 programs. One is a traditional seminary diploma, but another one is a certificate where you're learning half theology and half life skills, accounting, computer skills, soap making, kitchen, and of course agriculture. So that they will have marketable skills when they graduate from our school with their certificate that allow them to have a decent job, and then they won't have to worry so much about people giving money in the offering plate, because it's just not happening. At least in Kenya, it's not them. So that's them out in the field. Next one. We also, on the weekends, for instance, this weekend we had a Reformation service, a festival for about 200 that were there. We limited our invitations to the local people because we can only accommodate X number of people. Most of these people don't know who Martin Luther is, and we had a children's program for them, simple gospel explanations. We sang "The Mighty Fortress is Our God" in Swahili, and then we just talked about what that hymn means and how the Lord battles for us against the devil. And you can hide behind Jesus, who is going to stand between you and the evil bully of Satan, and you don't need to worry about all his evil tactics when you hide yourself behind our Lord and Savior. So these are things that people don't know about. Most of the tribal people, they still practice their pagan religions, which means a lot of witchcraft, occult stuff. Even some of our students show up with some of these ideas, and we have to teach them how this is not biblical. So don't do these satanic arts, while you're learning the Bible. It's just, and when they learn that it's wrong, they're repentant, but no one's taught them. So that's how dire the churches they're coming from are when they don't even understand some of those things. So there's a lot of demonic influences, even in our camp, with demonism and people under oppression from the devil or even possession from the devil. So they like to hear about how the devil can't hurt you when you have Jesus on their side, because even the pagans believe in the evil forces. That's why they worship their occult stuff, right? They're either trying to tap into the evil or they're trying to protect themselves from the evil. So one thing we all have in common is we believe in evil. But what they don't understand is that Jesus is the one that will protect us from all those terrible things. And then we had sausages and sauerkraut feeding all the people. And one reason we like to do this kind of thing when students are around is we're teaching the students how to organize an event. You guys organize a Christmas meal or a Thanksgiving meal, right? And you have to email people maybe 2 weeks ahead or a month ahead. You have to have a grocery list where you say, these are things you need, or you need to count how many turkeys you need to feed this gang of people, right? You need to make sure that there's parking in front of your home, right? You're thinking very logically about all the pieces that need to be done. Well, that's a learned skill. And in Africa, the time works a little bit differently, and a lot of times things are last minute, and people don't intuitively necessarily think that way about organizing an event. Now, when it comes to your meal at your house in your village, it probably won't have a big impact. You can tell the villagers the night before, oh, we're slaughtering a goat tonight, so come to my house, and we're having a big festival, and they'll pass the message on, and everybody will come, and it'll all work out well. But when you're having a children's program, and you're trying to bring people to do a VBS, right, or you're trying to do an outreach activity, it's not going to work quite that way. You've got to operate with these more Western principles, if that's a thing. I would just say just logic, and that's a learned skill. So what the students are doing is they're saying, oh, now we understand how I need to have a list of things to do. I need to have an order of priority list. I need to assign tasks to different people, right? And by them learning how to do that, will allow them to have church more efficiently, have things work just more smoothly generally, starting on time. And in the African churches, if they start 2 hours late, well, that person who was interested in the Lutheran church, well, they'll just hear music from another church, and they'll just go there and have church there, and that'll be their home, right? So instead of the church they were waiting for, and what are they waiting for? Well, pastor's late because, well, he just got talking to someone on the side of the road for an hour, and now everybody's waiting in church, right? So they're learning that by trying to be more efficient, follow the timings, you're going to have a more successful or healthy operation of all the things you're doing. Next slide. Here's a picture of some of the local ladies in their nice Maasai outfits. They don't usually dress that nice, but when they visit us, they put on their best. That's a wonderful practice that we've lost here in Canada. I remember, when I was a kid, when the pastor came to our house, it was a big deal, right? You put out the coffee and kuchen, right? And everybody would be, you'd sit to tell the kids to come down and put a nice shirt on, right? Pastor's visited, right? Well, nowadays, you know, the pastor sometimes can't get into the house, right? They won't even open the door when he's ringing, right? You know, or maybe it's go get your own glass of water from the tap. You know, it's over there, right? Well, in these more ancient places, there's a very a more wonderful biblical view of hospitality. So when we visit them in their homes, they're very gracious to us, and we try to be very gracious to them. But the reality is, these ladies are maybe Christian. I don't think so. I don't know. I suspect not. But they would do things still like female circumcision is still happening over there. Other illegal processes just happen because the government can't actually monitor all that, right? So, next slide. We have a local school that we teach religion at every week. It's about a 45-minute walk, about 150 kids. It's a privileged place for us to be teaching because the Maasai people decide on who teaches that stuff. But because we've been so kind, looking after them, fixing their problems, you know, I've got a bag of recorders, the flutes, to bring to the school. They've asked us to be basically their chaplains. So the students are memorizing the small catechism, and they're enjoying it. And I remember the teacher, yes, ma'am?
Is it all in English?
It's in English, yes. The operating thing is English. A lot of them speak Swahili and other dialects, but everything in Kenya is pretty much English, right? And so they're learning it in English and loving it. The principal one day, or one of the teachers, was scolding the kids because they hadn't memorized Luther's morning prayer yet. And she said, I do this every day at my home with my kids, and you go tell your parents you better be doing that too, right? And they're not Lutheran kids. They don't come to our church. They've got Baptist-y type places close to them, but they're just eating up our doctrine. They don't understand basic who is God as a Trinity. They don't know who that is. So when they hear about these simple things from the Bible, they say, oh, we never knew that. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. And we can't keep up with the needs in terms of literature and giving out that kind of thing to them. So these are some of my two kids were actually volunteering at the local school, teaching them math or some subjects like that once a week. Next slide. This is also a privileged place we have in a prison. One prison. We don't get there very often because it's quite far, but we're considered their chaplains there. And when I went there and preached with Rev.Maj, it wasn't a long sermon, it wasn't a long message, but all these men were just in tears to hear the gospel, to hear that even though no matter what they've done, Christ forgives them their sins. Most of them are in there forever for whatever they did, usually theft. And it was the border of Tanzania, so a lot of illegal refugees going back and forth end up in the prison. And they wear the costumes like in the old movies with the stripes, like with the little hats on, So all these men there just wanting to hear. You go to a prison in Canada, they're not going to care, right? I did a little bit of prison chaplaincy in Montreal. I mean, nobody really cares. It's Canada, right? Nobody cares about religion, right? Well, over there they know there's a God. The question is, does he love me or not, right? Is he going to forgive me or not, right? And he does. He loves all people, and what does the Bible mean? So now one of the reasons they're so happy to have us is we bring them soap and toilet paper, which they have to buy on their own. And when you first get in there, you've got no money to buy on your own. So that's how you live. So we give them that. So that makes them very, very happy. Again, it's not like in Canada where, I'm fairly certain that in Canada, our prisoners are getting soap and toilet paper, aren't they? When I was in Montreal, they had a little retreat center in the middle of the medium secure prison. So that if the security guards were happy with you, you could go in there and have a bathtub and have your own private video movie system and all these sorts of things. So hard life, right? But over there it is a hard life, and you know that. So next slide. So we have support from all of the many different countries in the world, mainly America, Australia, Finland, Canada, I think England as well. We're not a registered service organization of LCMS because we don't qualify for. You're not allowed to teach in other countries if you're with Missouri Synod, which is a real problem for mission work. So what they do is allow literature to be made available, but you're not allowed to teach it. Again, that's seen as imperialistic. So now in Canada, that's not the case. So we're not just doing humanitarian stuff all over the world. We're doing some of that, but it's secondary to preaching the gospel. Now in Canada, we've applied for LSO status, which is a listed service organization, which would make us a charity of LCC, and our president, Tim Teuscher, has encouraged us to apply for that, so we likely will receive that. And then if people want to give us money, it's an easy thing, because we'd be a Canadian charity, you get a Canadian receipt from the government. Right now, if you'd like to give us money, you would go to the Concordia Lutheran Mission Society, the CLMS, and you would give them a donation, and you would put in the memo of your check 3 places, 3 targeted missions of our mission. One being money for building, one being money for student transport, and one being money for Canadian professors to teach there. So you have to decide right now which of those 3 you would give to, if you would give money to us through them. But down the road, that won't be a problem. If you want to give money, you can just give a check, but we're not there yet. Yes, ma'am. Yeah.
Professors building, it will be
professor student transport. So the students have to pay for their own transport to come, and when they're coming from other countries, it's basically like a month's salary for them to come. Now, I don't know if you'd be willing to do this, Pastor, but could we put a little offering plate just at the back, that at the end of the day, if anybody wants to just give $10 or something, they can put it in there. I don't encourage that way, because you have to trust me with the money. I'm trustworthy, but I hate for anyone to ever wonder, right? So that money would go into Lutherans in Africa, but you wouldn't see a receipt or anything like that. So instead of that way, I would just encourage going to Concordia Lutheran Mission Society in the meantime, if you'd like. But more importantly, or as importantly, is praying for us, the next one. Praying for us. If you do want to ever, as a church, want to include us as a budget line, where you say, you know, we're going to give $1,000 a year to Lutherans in Africa as a budget, that would be great, or $100. Another thing you can do for us is you can volunteer. If you've got some skill you think we could use, we have volunteers all the time. We had a nurse come for 3 months. She went around doing an eye clinic for the locals. She looked after our students. We had ex-military guy come fix our equipment. There's teams coming all the time of various skill sets, and Pastor May decides whether or not there's a need for that, because if somebody just comes and doesn't have anything to do, there really isn't anything to do there but work. so it's not a holiday resort, you know, basically. We're just a farm with a school. But what a lot of our volunteers do is they come and then they tack on a vacation afterwards. Kenya's known for, like South Africa, for safaris. And so we've got easy ways to take people to these safaris, yeah, that's basically the big hit. So we also don't pay for transport for people to come, we just don't have the money, but we look after them when they're there. And everybody finds it very rewarding. So those are some ways you can help us, and of course praying for us. So what I'd like to do now, before I take any questions, how long have I been babbling on for, Pastor, at this point? 45 minutes? Right, that's my 45-minute presentation, so I did it right on time. But I don't usually add these ones here, my kids. So why don't my kids come up here, and so please stand up, my children, stand up. And come on up, make a line over here, and I'll put the little slideshow on that Katie has for us, which is showing pictures of us in action over there, Katie. In action, but there's some pleasure pictures too. We had a chance to do a little bit of holiday when we were there and see some sights, so you'll see some of that. I'll start over with Caitlin to say something you like about Africa and something you don't like, but to not say the same thing. Okay, we all know you don't like the food. All right, we know that. Okay, so why don't you say that one? Okay.
So there's not really many seasons in Kenya. There was a drought for 2 years that had been going on when we got there, and finally it rained in January for the first time. So it was really cool to see how everything got so green practically overnight. But on the flip side, we really miss the Canadian seasons, and it's difficult to just see the same thing all the time. So that's
Next person.
Pardon?
Oh. Others? All right. What's the next
It's
person?
right here.
Just looking for the sticky. Oh, there it is. Marcus, can you find this sticky?
Is that one muted? No? Is it green?
Yes, it's green. Is there another button somewhere?
No, that's it. Just hold it close.
Hello?
Oh, okay. All right. So what I like about Kenya is the people are very friendly. Over here, it's more people are more reserved. They have their own private lives. They don't really come up to you very much because they're busy. But there, people don't. They have a lot of free time. They don't have a lot of activities. So yeah, they just sit around and walk around, and they're very interested in you. So yeah, they come and say hi. They ask a lot of questions. So just they're very nice people. What I don't like is because of the lack of water, the dryness. Every plant has developed these long thorns to keep stuff from stealing the water from it. And those thorns come out of the trees and they're just everywhere. And you just get stabbed every time you walk. All our shoes that we wore there have all these holes. We have these permanent thorns that are just stuck inside. You can't get them out. And occasionally you walk on like a rock and it will push the thorns that you didn't know was there out and stab you. And they have poison in them. So like I've gotten twice I've had that kind of a swollen foot that I can't really walk on for a day. So that's unfortunate.
So some things that I like the animals there, like the cows. You can walk out and see giraffes sometimes, and the rabbits and chickens, and goats. Those are the kind of animals that we have there. So I enjoy the animals. And then something I don't like, well, the roads are really bad there, so you kind of smashed around in the back. And yeah, that's not very nice. It's just really bumpy and rocky. And sometimes
Pothole City.
And sometimes in the rain you can get stuck with the bus. Everything just turns down. Okay.
Well, the things I like there is probably like going on safaris we do sometimes. And then the things I don't really like, well, like it's too hot when it's really hot, but then like when the rainy season comes, you just wish it wouldn't keep raining. And like, yeah, all your boots are muddy, your house gets really muddy all the time when it's raining. And there's lots of dust, so it's hard to clean your house, because if you step on it, there's more than here.
There's a cafeteria, so we don't have to cook. There's also this window in the night during part of the year, all night long, during the evening too. And it's very loud while we're sleeping.
When he says there's a lot of wind, it means when you're half done your meal and the weight of your food isn't holding your plate down while your plate just busts up in your face. That kind of wind. Every day. I like Kenya. I really love like arts and crafts, and here most things are made in China, or like handcrafts, or they cost so much money. But it's neat in Kenya. They really make their own stuff. Like so, I bought some like traditional Maasai bracelets to show you their handcrafts, because when we go to an event with our Maasai neighbors, I mean the ladies are just sitting around eating. Like they really make this stuff. It's incredible. They make everything, and like there's not that much garbage because people just take whatever's broken and fix it and make it into something else. So that's incredible. So I actually really like Kenya. I'm finding the language thing hard because I wish I could talk to people more and everyone has a basic English, well not everyone, but I mean, you can only get to a certain level with the sort of basic English people have to talk to each other, because there's I think 42 languages in Kenya. So say Marcus and I are really working on our Kiswahili, but that's nobody's mother tongue either, that's another trade language. So you'll never, you know, imagine you had to function your second language, you never really get to say what you want to say. So that's hard when you're trying to connect with people. And I'm just kind of homesick. Like, I really like it there, but I just miss home. And as nice as it is, it's not here. So I'm enjoying being back.
I don't know why these guys never talk about the scorpions. So the kids enjoy looking for scorpions under rocks, and after you get about 5 or 10 rocks, you'll find one. But we don't like them when they creep under the door, and so we're always concerned they might get one of the shoes or something like that. But yeah, so I guess we'll take some questions at this point. So anybody have any questions at all? Yes, sir.
I was going to ask you, do you have continuous growth and building going on over there? You must have that, I guess, because you know the people who are coming there, that's what they're sort of relying on to make it through, right? And I take it that you have continuous growth.
Right, in terms of buildings and so forth. Right, we have about 100 people there. Right now it's a bit of a stand down because the students are not back from their summer break, so they're back home working and getting ready for September. But this last year we had about 100. So we do employ the locals, and they're quite happy about it. But they were quite upset when we finish a project because we've got nothing for them to do. But we still have a chapel that we need to build, which is it's going to be a big church, basically, up on the hill. And then we have possibly another guest house for another professor, and possibly a school, not a huge school, but a school that like a big room, and then finally a possible retreat center or Airbnb, basically. As a moneymaker. So we've got a few more buildings that are scheduled for the next 5 or 10 years, and then we'll be done the project. So we're looking for money for that. Actually, that's one of the targeted funds that we have. So, right, yes, ma'am.
I thought you mentioned that you purchased the property.
Right, yes, ma'am.
If you purchase the land, so we own the land, like in the church.
Right.
Are you getting any government subsidy in the development of the students because you're doing agriculture? And
Right, yeah.
Right. Are you getting any subsidy for that?
To the contrary, you think that what happens basically is there's so many people that aren't paying anything, that anyone who has money, they just tap into you and they penalize you, frankly.
So no subsidy.
It's not a.
They'll tax you rather than.
Well, that's it. Yeah, the taxes are horrendous actually, and some of the fundraising is simply to pay for the taxes so that we can be there. So it's sort of sad because you think the government would want to encourage a climate where businesses can thrive and schools can thrive because everyone profits, but there isn't that kind of an appetite. So we're hiding it. We're so visible as you see how immense the place is. So you can't kind of hide in a corner somewhere, right? So you've got so many government eyes on top of you saying, oh, we found another way we can tax you, or now we're measuring how much water you're taking from the well, and it's too much now. So now we're going to tax you on that, whereas our neighbors aren't even allowed to drill into the wells because they don't have permits, right? There's only so much water in Africa, and nobody goes after them, right? And even if they're affluent, well-to-do, they're connected with people in town or whatever. So the corruption on top of the lack of appetite makes it. The only reason we would be there is to serve the gospel, because you want to pull your hair out of your head, going, why are we here when nobody wants us here? I mean, from a government point of view, right? Not from the people. But yes, it's really sad and tragic. Yes, ma'am.
Would you say you're a competitor with your division?
Not really. Yeah.
Dominant
Yeah, because nobody's doing mission work. I mean, they're buying mosquito nets for people. They're bringing money. They're trying to get money. But even the orphanages that you hear about, go visit those orphanages and they're empty. They'll bring the children in and hire them when they know that there's a white person or a visitor from Canada coming through. And then all of a sudden there's kids in the orphanages, you see? So now I've got good friends that worked at World Vision. World Vision was actually one of the most credible organizations, so I'm not picking on World Vision, but what I'm saying is you've got to be very, very careful. Even with Missouri Synod ones, frankly, you've got to be careful. So we don't actually have any competitors other than other Bible schools from other denominations, but they're not accredited and they're not interested in accreditation. So we're a one of a kind. The problem with Missouri is we're not a charity of Missouri Synod, so they're a little bit jealous that we're there doing this work and that people are actually supporting us to degrees that they're not supporting a lot of the other Missouri Synod missions. The humanitarian stuff is great, but you've got to be watchful. We had, for instance, this drought for 2 years, and finally God gave rain a couple of months ago. But people were giving lots of money to Kenya, for instance. We've got some of the biggest slums in Africa just outside of Nairobi. But what was happening is the people were saying, we saw the food loaded on trucks, and then the trucks never ended with the people. So the government people get the trucks and they sell it to the local stores, and everybody's making lots of money, but the people that need it are still starving. And that's just the typical third world that's happening. And so really, if you give money to something, you need to really do your research and track it ahead of time, because you just can't trust, everywhere. Including, for instance, I mean, for someone like us, do the research. Go and see what we're doing, and you can easily do that. Oh, I forgot in my newsletter, or I sent this list around. Does someone have a pen they could lend for a moment? If you'd like to join our newsletter, and Pastor, do you have a pen? Do you mind passing that to? So if you don't mind, if you'd like to be in our newsletter or Facebook, you can sign up here, and we can give you constant updates, or you can just go online as well at our webpage and join, and then you can watch what we're doing and ask questions. And again, if you ever want to visit, we'd be happy to have you.
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
Sir, how do you know that you were specifically called to this task and not somebody else?
Yes, well, it's a good question, and the calls are always a hard thing, knowing, as Lutherans will say, there's two calls, for at least for a pastor. The external call and the internal. The external call is the community says, I think you'd make a good pastor or missionary or church worker of some kind, right? And then there's the other one going, inside my heart, I think I agree. Even though there should be a struggle like Jonah had, right? He didn't want to do it, and God still spit him out of the mouth of a fish, right? to get him to where he was going. So in my case, we've always been, even my wife and I met doing a kind of mission work. And I've worked with the Haiti Lutheran Mission Society for a number of years, taught for Lutheran Church Canada in our settings, looked after the theological education for our missions for Lutheran Church Canada in Latin America, Thailand, East Asia, and all that. So it was kind of a dream to do mission work. Did mission work in Montreal for a number of years, and she's from Toronto, and we did work through St. John's actually, when Pastor Drews was there. For years. So we've always had a heart for missions, but never had the opportunity to do this kind of missions when you're on the ground in another country. So the opportunity had just come up, and the organization had been looking for years for a helper for Rev. May, because the school was growing so fast, and it was too much for one man to look after this. We have lots of Africans that we've hired to help with business and so forth, but they're young people, they're still doing their degrees in business or whatever, they need a lot of coaching and guidance. So he's basically the one looking after everything. So they were looking for someone, and then I basically met that need. So it's sort of, they asked me to come, but we also really wanted to go too. But it's just temporary, so we don't know for how many years we'll be there.
Yeah.
But yes, sir.
How much trust does people have in you because of the history of the past?
Right. Well, in me, because I'm new, I don't know, because and they know I'm temporary. But Reverend May has been there 35 years as a missionary in Africa. So his whole family, even though they're foreigners, you know, and they're white-skinned and so forth, the people do have so much confidence in them because they've seen all the work that they've done with their hands. So where we are in that tribal area, they've developed, they've made sure, even right now this year, we had a flooding, there was a flooding issue, and one of the locals had done something to irrigation to flood everyone out, and so they call us up, and they say, can you take the tractor out and rescue whatever, this car, or can we cut through your lawn to get through your property to get to our next village? So the word goes out, right? The word goes out that we're good people, that we're not taking advantage. But yes, there's always going to be that in the background. There's always going to be this idea that, well, you know, you're from another country, or you were the oppressors, you know, back then, you know, hundreds of years ago. And all we try to do with that is say, look, it's not white or black, it's not Canadian or American or African. If we're Christian, we're all on the same team. So when we get to heaven, there's only one citizenship, right? The passport we got through baptism. And so hopefully on earth, by just building relationships with people and working and partnering with people as equals, that those animosities sort of subside. What we find, though, is the tribal warfare is worse. So there's more animosity and anger between, for instance, the Maasai people and the local other Africans who are moving in than with us as sort of foreigners. So it's a very comfortable climate, and Reverend May is fluent in Swahili, so he's you know, that's a unique thing. But again, he's been there for so many years. With us, you know, they'll say, well, why don't you know Swahili? Well, I don't have time to do that, to learn that. I've got very focused things I need to do while I'm there. How do we know you're trustworthy? Well, you don't. I've only been there a year. How are you going to know, right? So I can speak for the organization and for him that people very much love them. Whereas with us, well, it's still an ongoing relationship. But we haven't had any problems at all. You know, so, sir, yes?
For the children, how do you feel being in nature with all those animals? I noticed in the video, you have a snake over you. But how do you feel knowing from that different culture? You're there now with the animals. It's so different.
Who wants to answer? Which one? Simon?
Oh? Yeah. Well, we all like animals. We like the ones in Canada, and we also like the ones in Kenya. So, yes, it's much more, well, I suppose like where we live, we have deer there, so we were already kind of used to like looking out the window and seeing these cool animals. But,
so it's really neat to be able to just go outside and have someone call to you, oh, the giraffes are over there, and you just have to walk a few meters and they're all together, walking together in the evening. And there's a lot of really interesting birds that we've never seen before. So it doesn't feel super unfamiliar to us, but it's just different animals that are more exotic, and we really like that aspect of Kenya. And one time we were driving from a VPS event, and there was just an elephant walking on the side of the road. So stuff like that is really different and neat, and it makes it's one of the nicest things.
But like the animals come inside more, you know, like there's lizards in your room, and I mean I don't even mind the lizards, but they just fall on you, like when you move a curtain. I'm like a little bit freaky, and these kids are impressive. Like I do not like spiders. I can't sleep if there's a big spider on the wall. But these guys have been letting one live there like a pet. He's just the spider for like the last 2 months. So they're definitely getting used to having animals like with them all the time.
And then we have the nice animals. Just near us, we have the giraffes. So we see giraffes quite frequently, but we've had a poaching problem So there's some bad people just killing them and eating them. And we had a problem with our workers bringing the meat into the compound. And they bring all the meat out, even though it was probably going to rot. There's severe laws. I mean, you'll serve a lot of prison time if you get possession of giraffe meat. So that would be connected to our school. It would be absolutely terrible. So we have some of the good stuff. We have some baboons that come in and do damage, and they're probably the most frightening of the things that crawl around the side of the scorpion. In terms of looking after even just being there, the locals that have moved in of other tribes are quite happy that we're, like, for instance, monitoring giraffes. And we've got the courage to make a phone call to the government saying, look, or the tribal chiefs saying, look, this has got to stop, because the repercussions within tribal communities is different than as a foreigner, actually. So they're not going to come and put a spear through my kids, because they know that that's going to have a larger impact in terms of diplomacy. But amongst the tribal tribes, you know, there's more that could happen, right? So some of the crime that's going on, people are looking to us for help. And with the World Vision question, actually, I mean, World Vision isn't working in these little areas. And so, for instance, where we are, you saw the school there. My first week that I was at the school, the kids weren't going to have lunch. So what happens is they get fed lunch at the school. The government provides the means for that, but they all bring a stick to school. It's like, why do all these kids have a stick? Well, that's the fuel. So they all have to contribute to their lunch by making sure that there's wood to burn, to boil the water for the corn paste. Called ugali is what it's called, like a rice sort of white stuff. That's their staple food. And so when I was there, I said, well, no food for the kids because the water pipe broke. So our missionary, Rev.Dr.Maj, he goes and he gets our plumber and goes and fixes, even though he's depriving him of the work he's doing, so that the kids can have food. So everyone's happy that we're there. We're doing these charitable works that nobody hears about or sees, and it's the stuff that the big organizations know nothing about, because they just have a different objective and they're working at a whole different level. So we're doing that kind of work, yeah. So anybody have any last question before we maybe, yeah?
So Reverend May has had malaria 13 times. How about you guys?
I did take a dosage of malaria meds because I thought I had it, and I have it with me actually, because if I see the symptoms, it could be in my blood for 6 months. So, but we're not in malaria zone. We've got a lot of mosquitoes. We have a lot of mosquitoes. We have a mosquito net, but even if you roll against it, the mosquitoes will just bite you at night, and you'll have all kinds of itches in the morning. But one sort of teaching thing I was doing, I was in malaria zone, so I think I got it. But overall, in terms of health, we're probably sick, I'd say, at least I am, probably 20% of the time I'm sick with something. But when I was a military chaplain, I deployed to the Middle East several occasions, I was always sick. Everyone's always, sick in another country. So whether it be the runs or something, you just kind of live with it. My kids have had various different ailments, and they've been real troopers. We don't know what a lot of it is, but when the Mays have told us that when they're in the west of Africa, it was even worse. And 50% of the time, for probably a dozen years, they said they were sick with whatever. So they've built the immunities up. We haven't. So that's one of my personal big challenges, because when you're feeling that way, or you've got fever or whatever, you just regret doing this. Or when your kids are sick, you wonder if you're a good dad, or if you failed them, right? Because you're saying, I'm supposed to care for these kids, and yet, is it serious or not, right? And we're really isolated, so we're not near town. You can't just go, it's not easy. It's not easy to do anything, right? So, but yeah, does anyone have any final? Yes, sir. Yeah.
How difficult it is as a father, as parents,
keeping these young kids together in your decision to go there?
Yeah. Well, good question, wonderful. Before we left, when we were thinking about going, we had lots of conversations with these guys to feel out what their interest levels were, because you don't want to have them resent you down the road because you uprooted them. One reason I left the Army was because I wasn't around enough as a dad. We were moving around a lot. So our last stop was where we live right now in Fort Erie, Ontario, and then we weren't really ready to just move and go to another country. So it was a little bit surprise to all of us, but for the most part they were quite excited about going. But it took a while to get there, I guess. But even over there, they knew what we were going to get going there. I'd been there once teaching, and was able to be honest with them that it wasn't really a great place. I mean, there's nothing to do. It's not like fun. There's not other kids. They're going to be homeschooled, so they're just going to see us all the time. But the May family were in the same position, so they had a couple kids that are still there. Most of their kids have gone back to the States. When the kids get a certain age for them, they send them to the States to a Lutheran school where there's some Lutheran family they board with and they live with, and then and they finish their schooling off there. So with my gang here, they knew it was going to be temporary, but still coming back. They're not that eager about going back to Africa, but they know they have to do it, and we try to find ways of giving them, even over there, trying to find nice things we can do to boost their morale. So my little one said he likes to go going on a safari, so we'll go see the animals for a day or whatever, but it's a tough one, knowing. But knowing that it's temporary, I think is helpful. This one's getting married this year, so she's not coming back. This guy's getting, he got a job working for a pro-life MP in Ottawa on an internship. So we're hoping that, so he's coming back here, staying here, and we're hoping that might morph into a job with the Conservative MP. I can't remember the name, from Saskatchewan. Maybe it'll morph into a job there. Maybe they'll pay for a school or something. And so we don't know. And then these ones are coming back. So whether they like it or not, it's kind of right. So, but there's it's. I mean, when we think about life though as Christians, right? I mean, we all have to make sacrifices, right? And being on planet Earth isn't for our enjoyment, right? It's so that we serve the Lord in different ways, and God gives us different crosses to carry, right? And sometimes it's illness, and God's got a purpose for you through that illness, right? Sometimes it's a job that you're stuck in and you wish you weren't, but God's got a purpose for you there, and so we just have to follow the Holy Spirit as He kind of yanks us around, right? We don't always like to be yanked around. But I've noticed as a pastor, for people that, it's the people that say, you know what, I'm only going to live for myself, and or I'm going to do my own thing, or I'm retiring now, I've reached 65, and now I'm just going to cruise the world, and I'm not going to have anything, to do anymore with ministry or whatever. Those are the ones that often the Lord will shorten their life, right? Because as Martin Luther had said, he said, the reason that we're on earth is essentially to be missionaries, right? Wherever we are. And that's why Jesus is delaying His coming back the second time, right? I mean, Jesus, come Lord Jesus, where are you? Well, He's there, and He's eager to come and take us all home, but He loves people so much that He wants to make sure there's maximum opportunity for other people to come into the church and receive the Lord, right? So He delays, even if it's for one or two. Only one or two in the world that are the one He's targeted to bring into heaven. He's going to delay His coming until they hear the gospel, right? That's at least how I see it. So I think we all need to realize we're all missionaries wherever we are in life, and with that comes you know, a price. People don't like what you've got to say. You know, they're going to be angry when you don't speak the Canadian way, right? Which is the, everything's okay, and right? You know, well, no, people don't like that, right? So you're going to suffer because you'll have family members who ostracize you because you stand up for the truth and the gospel, right? So all to be said is this is one way of kind of suffering for the Lord, I guess, or, you know, in one way. But all of us have different ways that we also suffer for the Lord. And like you guys have to sit through this presentation, right? So you have to suffer for the Lord. I hope you're not suffering too terribly.
It sounds like we're taking this process forward. Are you planning on going to other areas in Africa?
Right. That's our Reverend Maj's dream, is to hand this whole mission over to the local African leaders, but we unfortunately haven't found the right ones yet who will be able and that have demonstrated trustworthiness and abilities and skills to hand over something at this grand, this size to them. But the idea is, as soon as we find those right people, they will have it. And actually, part of our accreditation means it has to be governed by, like right now, our organization is governed by African bishops. But at the end of the day, the money isn't coming from Africa, it's coming from America. So we have a separate fundraising governing board in America. We've got 2 governing boards. But part of our accreditation is that the money for our organization has to be half African. So we're trying to find ways that we can make it self-sufficient in all these ways, so that we can back off entirely. And Reverend May's hope is to build the same thing in another part of Africa, the same thing. And also he's fluent in French, and so we've looked at some countries like Burundi, where we could have the French Lutheran seminary there. So we have 2, and then he would then be, you know, an old man at that point and would retire. So we're trying to eventually back out of there. Now I'll be backing out way before him, but I'll be helping behind the scenes in terms of some of the administrative, strategic planning, hopefully until I die. Right? Good. Yes. So any other questions? Otherwise, what I'll do is maybe we'll take 10 minutes to go to the bathroom, and then I'll do a short 20-minute.
Oh, okay.
Does that work for?
That's okay.
I think it's going to be too much long suffering to go right to one.
Yes. Well, sure. I mean, whatever.
So why don't you
take the
guys...
time to eat, and you can use the washroom. There is some coffee if you would like coffee to keep you going, and water. So take 10 minutes. We gather back at 12:40.
Right, and we'll do 20 minutes more. Okay.
And you guys can sit down.
Right, I forgot about that.
So, Katie, when did you get married?
September 9th.
September 9th. Congrats. That's your other half.